What's up, guys? This is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we are back with another Wolverine live recruiting show. I am here to answer all of your questions. Before I do that, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos, and as always, head over to the Wolverine.com and you can get exclusive insider information on everything recruiting. If you can't get enough of the show, you can get even more questions answered. You can get, again, exclusive recruiting intel, portal intel, team information, more insider stuff on all this going on with the NOA. You can head over to the Wolverine.com, subscribe today, $1 for 2 months. Use the exclusive promo code UM1. Come join thousands and thousands of Michigan fans and interact on our message board. All right, guys. So, like I said, I'm here to answer all of your questions, and we are going to go in the order in which they come. But if you do want to skip the line, you can hit that little box with the $sign. That's a super chat that helps me get out on the road so I can continue to see top targets. And yeah, you can skip the line, get your question answered first. I will be back on the road this weekend, actually seeing a few top targets. So again, hit that super chat button if you want to donate and head to the top of the line. But if not, we will start with Tyson Smith. And he says, when is Ty Haywood deciding? Yeah, Ty Haywood's decision could come at any time. National Signing Day is next Wednesday, so a little more than a week from today as we are, broadcasting this. I still feel really confident in my prediction for Ty Haywood. I think the Wolverines have done enough here. They got him on campus for the official visit. He was able to get more familiar with the program, had really positive meetings with Sherrone Moore and Grant Newsome. Sherrone Moore obviously sold him on his production when he was the offensive line coach, winning back-to-back Joe Moore Awards. The fact that he was an offensive lineman himself, I think all that really moved the needle for Ty Haywood. I think his mother got a good look at everything. At the end of the day, I've always said this one will likely come down to NIL. I think Michigan has a really strong offer on the table there. I don't think that Florida State is willing to go into the same ballpark as Michigan. Last I heard, Texas Tech was still struggling to get there as well. So it's pretty smooth sailing for Michigan. Again, a decision could really come at any point. It doesn't have to be next Wednesday on National Signing Day, but this recruitment, one way or the other will be over by then. So again, I still feel really confident in my prediction for Michigan. I feel like, Haywood would be kind of that bow to end the class and, quite the exclamation mark, getting another 5-star on board. It would give Michigan 3 this cycle. He would join Bryce Underwood and Andrew Babalola. Let's go ahead and go to Tyson Smith again. He says, is Zaire Mathis out? So Zaire Mathis on 300 Edge out of Imhotep in Philadelphia was supposed to make a visit to Michigan over the weekend. That did not happen. We reported earlier in the week that the trip was in the process of getting canceled. It is not going to be rescheduled. I think Michigan and Mathis have completely parted ways here, so I'd expect him to end up at Florida State or, Maryland, I think, is still scheduled to get a visit as well, and Virginia Tech's making a push. One of those schools will likely get Mathis, but it won't be Michigan. Again, I think both sides have parted ways, so you don't really have to worry about keeping track of Zaire Mathis moving forward. Tyson Smith says, milkshake or malt? That's a weird question. I haven't had either in a while. That's not true. I actually had Shake Shack not too long ago. I like their black and white shake, but I do get a malt if I can. I like the little malt flavoring. I guess that makes me kind of old. I think malts are more for old people, but I like the malt style. Eric Badinger says, what would you say the odds are for Coogan if they can actually get him on campus? So yeah, as of today, or as of right now, He is scheduled to make a visit to Michigan this weekend. So for those of you that don't know, we're talking about Notre Dame transfer Pat Coogan, who recently entered the transfer portal. But I think Michigan would have a pretty good shot if he does make his visit. Again, he is scheduled to be on campus this weekend. He has a connection to the program. Jimmy Rolder, who obviously is one of Michigan's linebackers, they played together at Chicago Bears. During Coogan's recruitment, Michigan was a player there. I actually went to Marist and visited with Coogan and his high school coach, and I really enjoyed my interactions with Pat. I thought he was a great kid. I also liked him as a player. At the time, he was playing tackle, but I always projected him as more of an interior guy. Obviously, that's what he's become at the college level, playing some guard, playing some center. I think when you look at Michigan, they need help at guard. Obviously, they landed Lawrence Hattar, but Hattar won't be able to go through spring ball. And on top of that, Hattar's making a big jump coming up from Division II at Ferris State to Michigan. With Pat Coogan, Michigan's registration deadline's already over, so I don't know how that really is going to affect Coogan and his availability for spring. But you're getting a guy that's already experienced anyway. He has more than 20 starts under his belt. He started double-digit games for Notre Dame and helped lead them to the national championship. He was essentially their hype man. I mean, he was probably going to be a team captain had he come back. So, I mean, anytime you can add those high character guys, I think, with experience, I think you can take the chance, especially, like I said, there's question marks at guard. And then at center, Greg Crippen didn't start the entire year. I still think you have some question marks about him. I mean, Pat Coogan could push him for the center job, and at worst, he could end up playing guard. And I mean, both positions are available there for Coogan to get significant time. So I think Michigan's a good fit for him. I mean, I think of the two, of Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, I'd rather have Pat Coogan. So we'll see how things kind of shake out this week. He, is also looking at Indiana. He's looking at Ole Miss, which is set to get him on campus tomorrow. But, as we record this, I think Michigan will have a good shot if he makes his scheduled visit. Andrew Malek says, do we have a realistic chance to land either of the Notre Dame offensive linemen, or is spring portal more realistic at this point? Yeah, like I said, I think Pat Coogan is realistic if he does make his visit this weekend. I mean, they're also in conversations with Rocco Spindler. He has not formally set a visit to Michigan. He's been to Indiana. He's at Nebraska right now. I think with Nebraska, it's kind of an interesting situation. So Rocco wouldn't, because of the registration thing that I mentioned with going on with Michigan, Rocco would not be able to take part in spring practice. So that means, that's not really the end of the world for Michigan, but he would have that opportunity at Nebraska. So Nebraska today put him in their student directory. Now that he has not signed, he is not showing up as signed in the transfer portal. We have confirmed that. So he is in the Nebraska student directory, but is not officially part of the Nebraska program, if that makes sense. So they put him in there kind of as a reserve, like a just in case, because Nebraska's registration deadline ends tonight, I guess, at midnight. So he can technically, he's already in the directory. He can technically just slide on in and participate in spring ball at Nebraska. I know that's kind of a confusing situation, but that's, what's going on with the Nebraska side. And I do think Nebraska leads. I think this one's probably going to come down to NIL. And if it does, I'm not sure how much Michigan would be willing to spend there. Rocco did start this year, but he hasn't quite lived up to his top 100 billing as a recruit. He was considered a consensus, I want to say, top 75 guy as a recruit. He hasn't reached that. I think can be a serviceable guard, like I said, especially with Lawrence Hattar not being able to take part in spring ball and having to make the big jump from D2. He gives you at least a viable option there. So, we'll see. As of right now, I'm definitely favoring Nebraska. And but if things fall through, if things don't get done there, and he ends up visiting this weekend, obviously the door will be wide open for Michigan. We do have a super chat coming in from Shane Johnson, and he says, even with a generational quarterback for the next 3 years, we continue to struggle attracting elite wide receivers. Do you see that changing in the 26 class? Any must targets you have? So it's kind of a difficult question because Michigan hasn't invested or gone all in with NIL and wide receivers. So you've seen them spend. You saw them spend in the portal wisely. They didn't quite have the big names, but they did spend for Justice Haynes. They did spend for Damon Payne. On the recruiting trail, obviously they spent for Bryce Underwood. They spent for or they're spending for Ty Haywood. They put together really strong packages for Shamari Earls and Andrew Babalola. So I think with wide receiver, there might not be a big premium coming from Sherrone Moore and Sean McGee. Now, Sean McGee's obviously coming over from the NFL, and he has a roster management style that he likes. And it seems like they're just putting more premium on what Michigan's done traditionally, which is run the ball really well and winning with a top-end quarterback that doesn't have an elite receiver. I mean, when you look at JJ, I mean, he had some strong receivers with Roman Wilson, but he didn't have that go-to guy, that elite guy, which would have been Xavier Worthy had that all panned out, but it didn't. So JJ didn't have the elite guy when they won a national championship, but he did have a really strong run game and he had a really strong offensive line. And I think that's what they've tried to do for Bryce Underwood. And that's what they're trying to do in 26 as well, even at the running back position with Savion Hyder and Javian Osborne. But I think that this wide receiver room still needs help. I think that in order for maybe Bryce to reach his full potential at Michigan, or make it easier to reach his full potential at Michigan, you can get him an elite wide receiver. I think that just makes his life easier. It helps you open up the offense a little bit, especially with Chip Lindsey bringing a more balanced attack. You saw Drake May throw for plenty of yards, while Marion Hampton also rushed for more than 1,000 yards. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan, if those affiliated with Michigan, but not directly, Sean McGee or Sherrone Moore, really push for Michigan to get involved with one of the 5-star level wide receivers this cycle. I wrote about Chris Henry. Obviously, that's a tough task with him being committed to Ohio State, but he is, taking other visits. He's looking at Oregon. He's looking at Tennessee. He's looking at Texas A&M. And all those schools have one thing in common, and that's NIL, right? So Michigan has that. They have the backing. I think that, they should pursue a 5-star level wide receiver. I mean, the worst thing Chris Henry can tell you is no. The worst thing Tristan Keys can tell you is no. But I do think, with how they're balancing budget, it would have to be, the Ellisons or somebody that was involved with the Bryce Underwood deal to make that happen. So it's pretty much all I can say for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if, Michigan does go that route later in the cycle. All right, let's go to Kinetic 615. He says, update on the 2 Notre Dame offensive line transfers. I heard one of them is strictly NIL. We updated it earlier. I think they have a better shot with Coogan. He's set to visit this weekend. Rocco Spindler is the one that is looking at more NIL. I think Nebraska is probably the favorite there. Hasn't set a visit to Michigan. If he comes out of the Nebraska visit and doesn't sign, then, the door will be open for Michigan to get him on campus this weekend as well. Zachary Pizot says, Can you explain the situation with Keys? I saw Michigan wasn't on his top list and haven't seen the coach's visit. Are they pivoting from him? I don't think Michigan's had true NIL discussions with Keys yet. And most of the schools he included in his top group were Southern schools. You know, he's from Mississippi, so I think he's a tough pool in general, even with NIL. But I think in order to get back in the Keys race, they would have to have those deep NIL discussions like they had, you know, like they've been having with a guy like Ty Haywood, who also happens to be from Mississippi. I know he's a Texas guy, but he's originally from Mississippi. So it can be done, but I think, you know, guys like Chris Henry or Tristan Keys, those are going to have to be later in the cycle. Like I mentioned, it's probably going to have to take, you know, outside of the program influence to help the wide receiver room. And you've seen Michigan just hasn't really been NIL heavy with wide receiver, even in the portal. Not that there were a ton of amazing options, but you know, the portal class was a little underwhelming. But I think, again, I would love to see Bryce have some elite weapons. So I think you do go the NIL route at that position in 26. We have another super chat coming in from Michelle Wallace. And he says, I know you're a teching and portal guy, but do you know about the defensive coordinator? So I think that's what Michelle was saying. Yeah, with Wink Martindale, we haven't heard a whole lot. Obviously, there's been some NFL interest there. Some of the key jobs filled in. So that was obviously a positive for Michigan. I mean, it's going to be something to monitor. I think Wink was always a guy that you were kind of expecting to take a look at NFL jobs as soon as they came open. Obviously, Michigan's paying him well, so that's something to consider. But you know, it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on moving forward. You know, in terms of how Wink leaving would impact recruiting, I'm not sure that it would. He hasn't built those relationships with the 26 guys yet. He hasn't really been out on the road. His role has been more strictly, you know, going over scheme and things of that nature when they get to campus for official visits. So if they can get someone in, if Wink does leave, they can get someone in that has some pre-existing relationships with these recruits. I don't really think it'll be much of an issue. David says, Leo Delaney is listed as an interior on 3, but he mostly plays tackle. Where do you see him playing at Michigan? Yeah, Leo's not committed to Michigan yet, but you know, he is a guy that the Wolverines are very high on. Our new employee, Ethan McDowell, wrote a really good feature on his in-home visit with Sherrone Moore. So I'm sorry, with Grant Newsome. So I think that, you know, he's definitely a guy that's high on the board when it comes to the offensive line. You know, in terms of where I see him, I saw Providence Day play last year, and I know he mostly played tackle, but I do think he's more of an interior guy. I think he's a little heavy-footed for the tackle position. I think he'll continue to add weight and be more of a guard. So that's where I would look at him at when you're evaluating Michigan's offensive line board. Ryan Keogh says, the Yahoo report is significantly worse than expected. Have any other recruits besides Andrew Olesh expressed concern to you on sanctions? Maybe Olesh's dad will be vindicated. Hopefully not, though, obviously. But yeah, no, I mean, we still have to wait and see what happens. There's been no sanctions. Michigan's obviously going to fight the NOA. I don't think until something actually happens, until there's something concrete, it'll be used as a negative selling point from other schools, just like it was with Olesh, where, you know, James Franklin was selling the hell out of that. So I don't think it'll really have too big of an impact on recruiting until something actually happens. Now, if there are sanctions, if there's, you know, the postseason bans and the strict recruiting things that they have to abide by, then, you know, at that point we'll have the discussion. But right now it's kind of just speculation until they hand down some type of punishment. Marquise S says, will Ethan join you on live content like this eventually? So, yeah, for those of you that don't know, we did hire Ethan McDowell. He is our new secondary recruiting reporter. So we're really excited to have him. He came over from the NC State site. Before that, he covered high school sports at the Boston Globe. So really fair, experienced writer, also young, who's going to go out on the road and do a lot of great things for us. We do plan to get him on the YouTube here soon, but I'm thinking of kind of reformatting our YouTube shows where we have more than just one Q&A show where I'm sitting talking to you in front of a camera. So hopefully we have, another show where we do something more creative. So if you have any ideas on YouTube shows or content that you would like to see on the channel, definitely leave a comment below. Marquise S says, what is the 26 defensive line board looking like? Any known priorities? So, yeah, Lou Esposito has been out on the road, in terms of actual defensive linemen and not edges. He was on the road with Sherrone Moore in the Northeast late last week and had a chance to see two big priorities out there. One is Jermaine Kinsler, on 300 prospect out of Bergen Catholic. I really like Jermaine. I had a chance to see him live against IMG last season, and he's extremely impressive. He's about 6'5", played the season at 270 pounds. I know he's listed here at 260, but he's a big, long kid, kind of in the same mold as a new transfer, Damon Payne. He is actually visiting Michigan this weekend. So I think that the Wolverines are right at the top of the list for him. He's coming in with teammate Jordan Thomas, who's a 4-star defensive back. Another guy they saw out in the Northeast was Damari Simeon. He's a top 100 recruit for On3. Doesn't really talk a lot, doesn't do a ton of interviews. Penn State's considered the early leader for Damari, but I think that Michigan has really showed him that he's a priority. Esposito visited him earlier in the month and then came back with Sherrone Moore. So, yeah, I mean, Damari Simeon and Jermaine Kinsler, both guys to definitely know on the defensive line board. Zachary Pizot says, how'd the Savion Hyder visit go compared to other schools? Seems like coaches made a good impression. Yeah, I mean, Michigan always makes a good impression when they stop by. I talked to Savion's dad, Rod, and had an interview with him following the staff's visit to his school. So you can check that out over at thewolverine.com. But yeah, I mean, I think Michigan, again, made another solid impression. Sherrone Moore's been heavily involved in that recruitment. Tony Alford has a special relationship dating back years. You had Sean McGee there, and there's already been good dialogue with him. They had a chance to meet Chip Lindsey for the first time, and that went really well. So I think Michigan's still in a strong spot for Savion. He may make a visit at some point this offseason, whether it's late winter or during the spring period. But his dad told me they'll for sure be on campus for an official visit, looking at, I think they said the second week of June, but it's still kind of early to be discussing official visit dates. So, but I think Michigan gets one. I think the Wolverines remain right up there with Georgia, Ohio State, and a couple others. Ryan Keogh says, how good is Haywood? Any concern that no blue bloods are after him and is overpaying? I think it's just late in the cycle. So a lot of blue bloods have kind of used up whatever they were going to pay. And I see Haywood starting off more as a guard as opposed to being a surefire tackle. So that might lower some NIL offers for him. But I think that, if Michigan thinks he's worth the money, they think he's worth the money. It is what it is. But, I have him graded kind of where the industry has him, right on that borderline 5-star level. I mean, he's an absolute mauler. He's extremely physical. He knows how to finish blocks. He needs to work a little bit more on actual pass pro and just keeping his hands inside and things of that nature. But I mean, he's an elite offensive lineman. He should play early on in his career at Michigan. And I think Michigan is a great fit for him because his play style really fits that smash mentality that Sherrone Moore has continued to instill in the program. Marquise S says, what happened with Mathis? I assume Michigan backed off. They both went their separate ways. I think, this is another one where, are you willing to invest NIL this late? I don't think Michigan was with Zaire Mathis. Jason Wilbur, is Moose out of Montana planning on committing soon? So that would be on 300 tight end Matt Ludwig, who is a top priority. I'm not sure if he's planning on committing soon, but the Wolverines would love to have him maybe sometime this spring. I think Michigan is out in front of that recruitment, but there are several other players there as well. Steve Casula has done a phenomenal job of building a relationship with him. Interesting fact about Ludwig, he lives in Montana, but is originally from Idaho. He really admires Colston Loveland and has talked to me about how much he values what Loveland did at Michigan and how he's produced at the position. And he kind of sees himself in the same mold. And I mean, the staff values him like that too. I know he's ranked in the 200s, but I mean, there's real buzz that he could be a Colston Loveland type at Michigan. Ryan K says, well, we answered that question. Jason Wilbur says, chances we get both Brady Smigel and Trey Taylor. I mean, pretty decent. I mean, Michigan is definitely in the mix with Brady Smigel, who just decommitted from Florida State, top 100 quarterback out of California. There's a pre-existing relationship with Smigel. Lindsey offered him at North Carolina, went down and saw him throw as an underclassman. Obviously, Michigan offered Smigel, and he was really close to committing to Michigan before the Wolverines ended up taking Brady Hart. I don't think there's really any bad feelings there. You saw Smigel list Michigan as a school of high interest, and Kirk Campbell's no longer on staff, so kind of fresh start with Chip Lindsey. And again, there's already a relationship there. So, yeah, I think Michigan has a pretty good shot with Smigel. There aren't a lot of really scary schools on that list that he put out other than Ohio State. I'm not sure what Ohio State's quarterback board looks like, but I can tell you that Michigan's evaluating plenty of options. If you notice, you haven't had quarterbacks really tweet out, I've got an offer from Michigan, because Chip Lindsey has been on the road. He's been seeing guys. He likes some other guys as well, like Oscar Rios, who's an on 300 guy. Obviously, they're going after Ryder Lyons, but he would technically be a 27. He's looked at Bear McWhorter, who is down in Georgia. Brody McWhorter, who's down in Georgia. His cousin is Bear McWhorter, who's an offensive line target for the Wolverines. He's looked at, Mason Holtzclaw, who just, reclassified to the 2026 recruiting class. So there's a few other options that Lindsey is looking at, but I think Smigel is a guy that Michigan could definitely land. And I think the Wolverines are out in front for Trey Taylor in 2027. So that one could happen as well. David says, Mark Bowman has officially reclassified to 26, but Michigan wasn't on his list. Do you think Michigan will continue to try, or will they move on? I'm sure they'll keep in contact. Steve Casula went out to see him at Mater Dei in California. He's really, I think even with the reclass to 26, he has an argument as the top tight end in the class. So I think they'll keep in contact, but it's probably more likely that Michigan ends up with Matt Ludwig and somebody else. I mean, they'll continue to shoot for Brock Harris. They're continuing to work on Max Sutter out of Illinois and getting back in the mix with him. So there's a few other tight ends on the radar. So I think Mark Bowman, Michigan's probably on the outside looking in there for sure. All right, guys, we have about a minute left, so we're going to go rapid fire. Make sure, again, to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. And if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, you can subscribe today. Use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com, and you can get exclusive insider information on everything recruiting, transfer portal, everything going on with this NOA situation. Head over to the Wolverine.com today. All right, guys, let's go ahead and scroll down and do rapid fire. Does Chris Henry's tweet response to your article mean what it implies it means? I mean, Bryce Underwood quote tweeted that NIL thing that I put out on him in an LSU uniform, and we all know where he signed. So I don't really put anything into it. And it's not really a shot at Chris Henry. I mean, kids do that all the time. You saw Bryce do it. Brody Jennings just told me like last week that he's 1,000% committed to Michigan, and he's tweeting nonstop about other schools and making other visits. So it's January. It doesn't matter. We'll see what happens next January. Let's go down to Josh Jackson. Why do they have you doing transfer and high school recruiting? I felt like our transfer portal coverage wasn't quite what it needed to be. So I, kind of stepped into that role voluntarily and tried to do more portal. I think portal has become such an important part of, college football and, sites like On3. So I felt like it was in our best interest for me to do a lot more portal as well. Kinetic 615 says, any information on LaRon Dews? Jamie Hart gave his name as another recruit, and he said he'd love to get a look from Michigan. I honestly don't. I haven't heard that name, so sorry, I can't answer that one. Devin Croyer says, how worried are you about the allegations against Michigan since On3 seems to know about it? Does it imply vacating wins, bowl ban, scholarships taken away, etc.? I mean, that's the biggest concern is the bowl ban, not just the bowl ban, the postseason ban. Scholarships being taken away, that's obviously a huge concern. So, yeah, I would say it involves all of that. I don't think that, we need to be super fearful just yet. We have to kind of let it play out and see what happens. I think it would be worst case scenario. And somebody mentioned Olesh's dad earlier, but that was his worst fear when when I talked to him throughout the process. He says, what if Michigan gets a postseason ban for, 2 years? What does that mean for Andrew? So I think there's going to be some negative pitches from other schools, but again, we just kind of have to wait and see. As far as how worried I am, I'm not, not worried, and I'm not worried. I'm just, kind of staying neutral and seeing how it all plays out. Vijay says, is it possible Michigan is recruiting too many tight ends for 26? Not really. I mean, you have to cast a wide net. You offer hundreds of prospects. You can only sign around 25. So Michigan plans to take 2 tight ends. You have to also keep in mind that they only ended up with Eli Owens, who's more of an H-back. So tight end's a big need in 2026. They want to replace Andrew Olesh, and they want to sign 2 this cycle. So they're going to take multiple tight ends. We do have a super chat from Michael Jones, and he just sends a super sticker. So thank you to Michael Jones. Vijay says, is there a Jerome Miles type of receiver in this class that can be a late riser with a good combo of size and speed? That's an interesting question. Who's a big receiver that I don't know, man. Not off the top of my head. As far as a bigger receiver that Michigan's kind of keeping warm with, really, you have to keep in mind that not only was Jerome Miles a true outside receiver, he also had insane track time. So nobody really comes to mind right now. But, I'll have to think about that one. Kinetic 615 says, with Barham moving to edge full time, how do you see Owusu and Bowles fitting into the linebacker rotation this cycle? Yeah, I think you could see Troy Bowles get on the field. Georgia's linebacker rotation was really deep. They had a lot of linebacker talent. Bowles definitely had some upside as a recruit. Obviously has really good genes, great understanding of the game due to his father. So I think Bowles will have an opportunity. I think with Owusu Boateng, he'll kind of wait in the wings. They really pitched him on being that Ernest Hausman type of linebacker. You also have to keep in mind that with Owusu, he didn't play his entire senior year. He didn't go through bowl practices. Hopefully he gets cleared to go through spring ball. He's had a nagging foot injury. So, if he's healthy, he might get some time as a true freshman in the rotation, especially, in lower level games. But I think being a year away from playing and not being fully healthy yet, I don't know how much he'll play right away. Kinetic 615 says, thoughts on Michigan's chances with Smigel, Lyons, and Trey Taylor. How would you rank them, and who would be the odd man out if it came down to it? Well, the problem is two of those guys are 27s. I mean, Ryder Lyons is technically a 26, and Ryder Lyons is technically a 27, and Trey Taylor is a 27. Brady Smigel is the lone 26. So if you take Smigel for 26, let's say ideal world, Michigan can land anybody on this list. So you take Smigel for 26. That means you can only take one of Lyons or Taylor. And if Lyons wanted in, unfortunately, Taylor would be out unless Taylor would want to play with Lyons. But realistically, I think 26 will be maybe a high floor guy like Smigel. Maybe they go the opposite route and go high upside. I really like Oscar Rios. They shoot for the stars with Ryder Lyons, so I think that'll be a really tough pool. I think realistically they land a Smigel or a Oscar Rios this cycle, and then get Trey Taylor in 27. I think, again, Lions, they're going to shoot for the stars there, but it's going to be a tough pool. In terms of how I would rank them, Ryder Lyons is the clear number one for me. I think, Taylor and Smigel, it's tough, with Taylor being a true 2027 to compare them. I'd love to get an updated eval of Trey Taylor. I just saw Brady Smigel not too long ago at Future 50. I haven't seen Trey Taylor in a while, so I'm just going to pass on that one. But Ryder Lyons, I think, I think Ryder Lyons might even be better than Jared Curtis. Kinetic 615 says, how good do you think Avery Gack and Caden Strayhorn can be compared to the other offensive line recruits we've gotten in 2025 in transfer portal? I think Avery Gack will be a kind of late career starter at guard, maybe, sits for 2 years, 3 years. But, once he's ready, I think he'll be a mauler in the interior of the offensive line. He's a straight guard for me. Caden Strayhorn, I think, is a straight center. So, I don't expect him to get on the field right away, but I think he'll continue to compete with Jake Winera once Crippen moves on, and even if they get, Coogan's 1 year of eligibility. So, he'll be in the battle after, his freshman year. Zinter says, so is Michigan's sudden windfall and NIL a strategy to try and keep kids in the fold while they weather the sanctions they've known are coming? That's an interesting question. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I mean, if sanctions do come, they might have to use more NIL to keep kids. But again, I think all of this is just so speculation. Let's go down to Jason Wilbur. That was a good question, though, Zinter. I don't know, man. It'll be interesting to see when if the sanctions do come. Jason Wilbur says, any news on Jake Krull visiting us? Yeah, I was going to actually hit up Jake here soon, but yeah, he got a visit from Sherrone Moore a couple of weeks ago. Michigan's been kind of dropping off a little bit in his recruitment, so I thought it was great that Moore went out to see him. I love Jake. I've talked about him many times on the podcast, so I need to check with him and see if he's planning to make a visit soon. But I mean, ideally, he comes in for spring ball. Zachary Pizot says, how do you feel about Chris Henry's comment to your tweet about him today? Like I said earlier, Bryce Underwood tweeted the same thing. I mean, these guys do that all the time. Who cares? It's also January. Like, we have 11 months until next signing day. A lot can change, especially with NIL. Barry Allen says, how is there even still a chance for a bowl ban for Michigan at this point? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it takes forever for these investigations to be completed. So, and I'm not sure it will be completed since Michigan's going to fight. So who knows when we'll know when all of this will get sorted out. But our Chris Ballas is on top of that. He has an insider with his not just thoughts. He's spoken to multiple sources around the program, and he has a lot more on potential situations and how Michigan's planning to fight this over at thewolverine.com. As always, I'll keep you tapped in when it comes to the portal and recruiting visitors this weekend. Michigan is hosting recruits this weekend. You have a good group with Travis Johnson, Jermaine Kinsler, Jordan Thomas, and others. Obviously, Pat Coogan coming to campus as well. So head over to thewolverine.com. Subscribe today. Use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months for exclusive insider information on everything recruiting, the team, transfer portal, and more. Join thousands and thousands of users on our message board. And also, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, and I'll see you guys next week.